writing a little story out here. I'm very lucky this evening to have Kathlee Fitzgerald, who is our honored speaker this evening. She's going to talk about witness reliability, Secret Service protection, presidential protection, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself and some of the work she's done. Kathlee?
I want to thank you for being here and listening to me this evening. My name is Kathlee Fitzgerald, and I am a JFK assassination researcher. In some quarters, that's commonly called the lunatic fringe. But you can tell from Glenn, you can tell from Jamie, that's not quite an apt name for us. Those of you who saw Cyril Wax, I don't think Cyril's very entertaining, but I don't think you possibly call him a lunatic. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I have an associate's degree in music. I have an undergraduate degree in speech English education, an undergraduate degree in interpersonal and organizational communications. I have a dual master's in rhetoric and public address and oral interpretation. I did doctoral work at the University of Texas at Austin in communications into this quantitative research. That's experimental research and design. How many remember the JFK assassination? Me too. I remember it very well. How many of you watched a lot of the TV coverage that weekend? How many of you saw Oswald shot? I was interested, of course, in the assassination when it happened. I really believe John Kennedy when he said, each one of us individually, singularly, can make a difference. And that's something I've taken with me my whole entire life. I didn't have a lot of time to do research into the assassination. I did read Josiah Thompson's 6 Seconds in Dallas when it first came out. I tried to keep up on what was happening with the House Select Committee on Assassination, which was in the mid-70s. But at the time, I was very in the process of having a lot of agents, one right after the other. Became really seriously immersed in assassination research in the early 80s. And I have continued in that vein. Probably my hot topics, my hot buttons with the assassination has always been the medical evidence. Not being a doctor, I had a lot of homework that I had to do. I had to hang out with a lot of doctors, ask a lot of pesky questions, read a lot of information in order to even understand what was appearing in documents, what was appearing in prints. I subsequently became very interested in the Secret Service and the interaction with the Secret Service. That now has become very much a focus of my research. The history of the Secret Service, how it functions, how it operates, from its inception in 1865. So tonight I'll be talking about the United States Secret Service and presidential protection and witness reliability. Witness reliability. You all were witnesses tonight to an event. There was a young man who came into this room, turned around, walked out, banged into that desk, and left. Right? Take out your little pencils. This is a test. These are little suspect description sheets. And I want you to fill out everything you remember about that person that you saw. Didn't see him? Very typical. Very typical. Didn't look, didn't see. If you don't know, please put like a DK or a line through the information line so that I know you just didn't miss it, didn't read it, but it's something that you cannot answer, you did not observe. And for those of you that came in late, too bad. Jamie, you want to play? Linda, you want to play?
Well, I knew he was coming.
Yeah. I talked to him in the stairwell, I know what he looks like.
You've talked to him at my house, you know what you're doing. An exercise that is done very commonly with FBI agents in training, law enforcement people in training, and it is specifically to beef up their powers of observation by what they have missed. But it also will be an example to you of how to judge when you're reading witness statements on the credibility of that witness. Okay, and I'll get into that more completely. How you start dissecting that. You know. And here is our suspect. Let's come to the head of the class, please. Okay, this is what he had on when he walked into the room. Halfway, a little bit more than halfway into the room, to about this level. Turned around, banged into that last step, and walked out. Probably took longer than 6 seconds. And what do we know about 6 seconds? About the length of the assassination. Okay, as you see, it's got a ball cap. See the color? Got a hoodie on, over it. Has on note the color, his jacket. Now, how recognizable is that?
Second most recognizable symbol in the world. No, it's first most, sorry. First, great.
Okay. He's got letters on his sweatshirt. He has black shoes on, black tie shoes. Want to take your jacket and your hoodie off, please. And your cap, sir. Yes, da-da.
That's a little bit more.
This is my son, Nathan, and I did pay him to come tonight.
Not much.
Not enough. I'm having him do this so that you can see body build. You kind of turn around, weight, body build, hair color, facial hair. Okay? Okay, baby. Thank you for coming. All right. Now, so that everybody doesn't get their own, so you can't choose, I'm going to pass these out. And then we're going to do some collating of the data. I know. That would be an easy one for you to do. Wait. You two are together, right? Actually, this is mine.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's mine.
Yeah. This is yours.
Yeah, that one's mine, this is hers.
I need to trade. Unless that one's yours. No, I got them ladies. Yeah, I'm on it. Okay. Thank you. When you in? Why don't you help me collate that? You get to write. You love to write on the board.
Oh, no.
I guess I should erase the whole thing.
Yeah.
Jamie writes big.
Okay.
All right. Now, let's take, for example, Dealey Plaza. You have between 300 and 400 observers in the plaza, hanging out the windows in buildings, on the overpass, that type of thing. There are, in the Dallas Police Department file, the direct witness statement from Dealey Plateau. And like we're about to find out, they can be all over the place. Some people observed nothing. They saw nothing, they heard nothing. Other people saw various things, a little piece here, a little piece there. The idea of a historian, as well as a police investigator, is to take all these pieces and put them into a cogent, cohesive package. Okay. What sex was our suspect? How many put female? How many have female on their sheet? How many have male? Okay. I think that's everybody. Okay. How many don't know? 2 don't know. That's enough. Everybody else. How many people are here?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16. So
No, you can't say that.
No, because
Okay.
I would say there are 4 people, 5 people that didn't vote. Do that.
9 minus 2 is 9.
Age of suspect. Let's do a range. 15 to 20. 2. 20 to 25. 2, 3. 25 to 30. 1. 30 to 35. Older than 35. Just here. How many don't know? 2 don't know. 3 don't know.
Okay.
Race. Caucasian. Hey, how many don't know? 2. Complexion. First of all, did everybody understand what the sheet meant by complexion? Yeah, very fair complected, dark complected, that kind of stuff. Okay. Do we have fair complected? Medium complexion? Dark complected? Any variation on complexion? Don't know. Height. 5 feet to 5'5". 5'5" to 5'10". 1. 5'10" to 6 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Take me off. 6 foot plus.
3. 6 feet to 6'3". 2. 6'4" to up. Weight. 100 to 150. 150 to 175. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 175, 200. 1. Over 200. Don't know? 2. 3. Oh, don't nose for height. 3. General body build. Slender. 7. Medium. Large. Heavy. Any variation? Don't know. 3. See why I didn't want you to do your own, because a lot of you are sitting there like, I'm not raising my hand. Face shape. Heart shape. Oval. 1. Pointed. 1. Square. Variation? Long. Long. Too long. That's good. Donut. 6. Any facial hair? Mustache? Mustache? No. Beard? 2. Don't know. 3. 4. We're losing some people.
Yes.
None.
Yes.
None.
Yes. Yes.
2 yeses or 1 yes?
One yes.
1 yes.
What about,
1 no. 1 no. In, don't know. In interrogating a witness, the interrogator would get you to be more specific, or get the witness to be more specific, as far as when they said facial hair, yes. I mean, the follow-up question, of course, would be, could you describe the facial hair to? Was the mustache, was the beard, what was it? Eye color. Don't go. Anybody that has a response to that? Brown. Brown.
Yeah, dark.
Dark. Dark. The rest? Probably not. Hair color. Black. Brown. Blonde.
dark, dark, dark.
Dark. Too dark. Any other variation? Don't know. 7. Hair length or style? Short. Long. Don't know? 7.
Shoulder length.
Shoulder length. 1. Any other variation?
It's covered by hood.
That's a don't know. That- Distinguishing marks. Everybody understand what that means? Scars. Or anything like mold. Clothing. Don't know. Distinguishing marks. I assume it's everybody.
Scraggly beard.
Scraggly beard. Yeah.
Didn't know, but a yes, but that was worth
Clothing. How many coats? 1 coat. What's the color of your coat?
Black long jacket.
Black. Good. 1 coat, 1 black. Hoodie. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 hoodies. Color? Dark.
Dark.
Black.
Blue.
Blue. Okay. So we've got 2 darks, 1 black, and 1 blue. You have a black one? Yeah. Okay. 1 blue. Pants. Jeans. Pants. How many jeans? 1, 2. Color blue, I assume? Jeans. Okay.
Said dark jeans or dark pants.
Okay. Dark pants. 1, 2. 2 dark pants. Don't know. 4.
That was black.
Black pants. Shoes. Does anybody have anything for shoes?
Tennis shoes.
Tennis shoes. Good. Color?
No color.
No color. Okay, one tennis shoe?
Black.
Black shoe. Good. And the rest are don't know. What was the weapon he was carrying and what was the description of it? Any takers?
I can tell you now. You need the chain thing, I don't think so.
How many don't know? Well, if you're not applicable, you're in a separate category. 7 and 1 not applicable. Any further description?
Baseball cap.
Baseball cap, excellent. See, I didn't think anybody would pick up on that he had a cap on under his hoodie. That's why I didn't ask about it. Any other comments under further description?
Seem confused?
Seem confused. Hey, that's your mom.
He was actually polite enough to come back in and fix the chair after he bumped it too. I noticed that. I didn't work that down on my sheet.
Oh, brownie.
I think she's gonna make him shave after his presentation.
So you can see from the collation of description of our alleged suspect that some witnesses thought they perceived something different than you did. Why is that? Perception is a function between our own two ears. What we see, the culmination of our life experiences and our knowledge, creates reality, which is to us, that's what it is. If we had not gone through this, if you had not seen Nathan subsequently, you would have walked your car tonight with the reality in your head of what you saw, which could be totally wrong. It does not mean that you're involved in a conspiracy. It does not mean that you do it on purpose. It's that perceptions vary from individual to individual. The actual stats, as you saw, already saw what he had on. You saw the color. My son is 6'4½". He weighs 140 pounds. He is a tall drink of water. His shoes were black. He had no weapon. No weapon with him. That was a little trick question. But just like in interviewing witnesses for the assassination in Dealey Plaza, to the assassination of Officer Tippett, allegedly by Lee Harvey Oswald, did you see a weapon? What did it look like? Some of the witnesses did, some of the witnesses didn't. Some of them saw Tippett's gun and could describe it. Other people did not. Witness reliability. The key is taking each statement, finding the commonalities between them. So if I did not know the stats on my own son, I could go, okay, these are pretty much the same descriptions that they share. You know, they're telling me something. It's an elongated face. Some people call it pointy chin. Some people call it an oval. This is a pretty good description of that suspect, according to the various witness statements. So you go through the collation, and you get a profile in order to judge the accuracy. Now, just because the person who said, yes, they have a long face, said he weighed 200 pounds. Well, that's not what we've turned up from analyzing the witness statement. He doesn't weigh 200 pounds. That's not where, you know, the range is in here. The range is here. In analyzing the Kennedy assassination information, and it comes, whether you're getting information from me, whether you're getting information from another researcher, a historian, a witness, a law enforcement official, you have to look at all their statements within context with the known facts. You also need to go back to the earliest witness statements that they made. Because generally and typically, that's the truest picture of what they observed. Now, yes, there's always the thing a couple weeks later, you know, I forgot to mention, or I just remembered I saw. That's human nature. That's very well within the parameters of credibility. I just remembered. If it's something that is way off the wall, or something that enlarges over the course of time, and their role gets bigger and more active, and there are several witnesses to the assassination that fall within this category. Jean Hill is one of them. How many are familiar with Jean Hill, the woman in red? Okay. Jean Hill was in a prime position in Dealey Plaza. She was standing right on the side of the road. She was with Mary Norman, who was taking photographs of the assassination, little Polaroids. They both had boyfriends that were Dallas cops, and they were there really to see the boyfriends they were dating, who were motorcycle officers in the motorcade. But subsequently, Mary Norman took some really remarkable photographs of the assassination. Jean Hill's first statement were about the number of shots, sounds of the shots. She thought the shots came from the grassy knoll. She ran across the street. She could describe, you know, the police officers that were already there, other people running up. Over the course of time, Jean Hill was then taken across the street to another building, to an upper floor, where she was interrogated by a law enforcement officer and threatened not to tell what she knew. Blah, 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 on and on and on, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Jean Hill was a very nice lady. She was a school teacher. But her role in the assassination literature gave her 15 minutes, or in her case, 15 years or more of fame. And consequently, her role became bigger and bigger and bigger. If you see something that grows like that, question it immediately. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Try to verify, you know, what, in this case, what she said. Could these actions have taken place? The best way to do it, when you're looking at anything, any event, you're trying to make a decision, you're trying to get a handle on something, do a timeline. That means everything you can remember from minute to minute to minute to minute. What was going on? What was happening? Was there time for Jean Hill to be whisked away and interrogated and threatened, particularly for like 2.5 hours? And also be on camera for WFAA, the Dallas television station, being interviewed and everything else. The timeline for Jean Hill does not fit. Now, until you establish timeline, it's real hard to judge credibility when you're looking at an event, the credibility of that. When I do historical research, I take an approach called historiography. And that means I want to look at the facts and only the facts. If it says, if a witness said, you know, at 2:03 on November 22nd, 1963, I was here. And I write that down. I don't pass a judgment on it. Unlike historians and history revisionists, they can put their own spins to it. You know, they can sort out the wheat from the chaff. That is not the tack I like to take. It's my tack to establish the facts. This is what they said, because what's going to turn up with Jean Hill, doing the timeline, doing the facts? It couldn't have happened. It could not have happened. Summarize on witness credibility. You always have to keep in mind the human factor. You know, is this person lying on purpose? Did this person misperceive something? innocent mistake. I think sometimes people that get deeply involved in the Kennedy assassination tend to jump on anything, that's conspiracy, that's proof of conspiracy, they must be part of it, they must be. No. Human nature, perception. The other thing to overlay on it is sociological. What was going on in the time frame. That will tell you a lot about a witness's perception. It'll tell you a lot about the event. What was happening in society at the time? What happened before it? What happened during it? What happened after? And when you combine all these factors, you will be able to judge credibility very, very well. Because you've done your homework, you're dealing with a set of facts, you're dealing with a complete picture, not an isolated little incident here. For any of you philosophy majors in the room, I'm sorry, I know you don't believe in cause and effect, but I do. There's something that happens, there's an effect from it. There's usually a cause back here that made this effect then becomes a cause, the cause is this. You've got to put it all into perspective. Questions? Witness reliability.
This doesn't have to do with the Kennedy assassination, just in general. How can witnesses then testify at trials that are occurring maybe like 8, 15 years? You know, we read the paper where they caught a murderer 15 years afterwards. How can the prosecution then really rely on witnesses over that huge a time frame?
Because usually it's during the course of the initial investigation, they have witness statements, they have reports of interviews with those witnesses, so they have, documents drawn to compare and contrast what's being said. It is a very common thing with witnesses in a prolonged period of time that their memories will get a little fuzzy, about certain things. The specifics, the important elements that's in their memory bank, they usually do remember. Checking on when you need breaks. How many of you have ever been in a car accident or have seen a car accident happen? Or had something very traumatic, like you knew you were taking a bad fall and you knew it as you were going down? There's a strange little thing that happens in our memory. We put everything in slow motion. Like I can remember sitting at an intersection and a car was coming down this way real fast. And the light had just turned green and I started to go. He was going so fast, I knew he was going to run the red light. And there was an abutment facing him. And he slammed right into this concrete wall. When I think of it even today, and this was like, 12, 15 years ago, I see the whole thing. I see him in the car flying forward, smashing into the steering wheel. I see him coming back. I see it in slow motion. Traumatic event. I've fallen. And I can feel myself going down, Except it happens like that. When you look at something like Kennedy assassination, you go, oh, well, witness credibility, witness reliability, of course, because this was a very traumatic incident. They may remember seeing the shot that blew his head off. But what was going on before that? It's just they were watching the rain. There wasn't an imminent danger. There was not a traumatic event at that point. They don't remember. That's where you have so much conflict about the description of Oswald, and did somebody really see a gun in the window, and didn't they, and what was the description, of the guy in the window? Because that was a point in time that doesn't feed into the trauma response. that we have in a slow-mo perspective, easy for me to say, perception. And a traumatic event, even years later, a witness will see very clearly, you know, that those split seconds, because you know the trauma is imminent and it occurs, that really doesn't apply to DV planning. Nor does it apply in most cases to the Bethesda autopsy witness. There's one autopsy witness that I talked about timelines. I did a timeline for the entire autopsy. He said, I never left the room, I was there, I ate my sandwich in the back of the room, you know, I never. That's wrong. You take all the other witness statements, you put it in a timeline. I can tell you exactly when Paul O'Connor was out of that room, what was going on in that room, and that's why he doesn't remember it. Because he was not. This is another thing that happens to witnesses, a thing I call memory merging, is that you have two events that happen close within the same time frame. And through the course of time, we kind of blend them together. Paul O'Connor is one of the Bethesda witnesses that said JFK arrived in a body bag, you know, over an hour before the hearse arrived at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Well, no, then you go to Jim Jenkins. You go to Jim Humes. You go to other records. What Paul O'Connor remembers was the arrival of a hearse. There was either an Air Force or an Army officer that arrived in a body bag. He does remember doing the autopsy x-rays, taking them up to be developed. Separate incidents from when the JFK autopsy began, or the duration. And he had sworn on a stack of Bibles that was JFK. He blended those memories. Remember I talked about human nature? Paul O'Connor was an autopsy technician in training at Bethesda. He was 19 years old. And he's witnessing the autopsy of the President. A lot of the techs were in the same boat. They were very young people. It was traumatic enough for me to even know he was killed. I wouldn't know, but I remember or perceive from being in that autopsy room, witnessing the autopsy of the President. Witness credibility. Always go to human facts. What's the key for Paul O'Connor, besides the timeline and his credibility as a witness? He couldn't observe some of the things he has testified he observed, and he says that never happened. Timeline, because he wasn't in the room. Well, what's the other? What's the human factor with Paul O'Connor as a witness and his credibility? He was 19 years old. And he did not come out with any of his statements until starting in 1977, when he testified before the House Select Committee on Assassination. And see, that's where David Lifton in his book Best Evidence gets all the bit about body bags. Because that's what Paul O'Connor testified to before the House Select Committee. And Lifton took that and ran with it. Doesn't stand up to historical scrutiny. Oh, no.
Yeah, no,
But-
I made a comment.
Make it simple.
It is. I made a comment last week to these people about, we were talking about the woman who witnessed the Tippit murder and how
Helen Markham?
Helen Markham, yes, the name. Right. And I made the comment that her testimony had changed over the period of time based on the years that had passed. And the one comment that I read was that when you give testimony over a period of time, things become mixed up in effect as you start to confuse things of what you saw with what you have heard or what you have read. Is that what you're calling memory mixing, or is this something else?
No, memory merging are
Memory merging.
memories that you actually have in this whole data bank of ours, but because they happen in close proximity to one another or because they were similar, we've just taken them and merged them together. I think an example of what you're talking about, Lynn, is think about all those wonderful stories our parents told about us when we were little teeny tiny kids. You know, things that we did. Well, at my ripe old age, I'd heard them so many times. I don't know whether I have a valid memory of that event. Some of them I swear, oh, I remember that. Or was it because I heard it so often that now it's become an implanted memory? And yes, that does happen to witnesses, particularly witnesses in the community assassination. Because so much time has gone by, there's been so much literature, they've been paid by newscasters and reporters for interviews, they've been given trips, you know, if they come and do this. So at this point in time, it's real hard to sort out until you what? Go back to their first statement and start looking at what they said since then. Look at them as human beings. Look at where you can have perceptual errors. Now, if you've done all that and you come to the conclusion they're dirty, then you better be able to back it up. Because I don't think there are too many people involved in this conspiracy. Oh, no. Yes, Jamie.
Why do you believe only certain witnesses were called before the Warren Commission and others were largely ignored? Did you see, I mean, a lot of people say they were lumped with the people who were not called, the people who saw multiple gunmen, why do you think that was? Time factor?
It's multifaceted. One, if you look at the purpose of the Warren Commission, you know, we know from telephone conversations and FBI memorandums and White House memorandums and everything else, that the decision that the best interest of the country would be served if the official position was single, no-nut assassin, not a conspiracy. Because I tell you what, at that point in time, LBJ thought it was the Russians. And the last thing he wanted was to get into World War III with nuclear power. Okay, he's since changed his mind. He's like, oh, maybe it was the mob, you know, because of what we were doing in Cuba. But that was the very initial reaction. Now, if he thought it was the Russians, you can't tell me he didn't believe in conspiracy. Okay. So the Warren Commission, in the best interest of the country, and we sorted out later, had to come to a conclusion that was simply for the very, very traumatized American public to swallow. And that would have been easy. What they did, if you go through that witness list, they pulled out, they tried to go to the big names, the big guns. You know, like James Rowley, who was chief of the Secret Service at the time. Rowley wasn't there. He was reading daily reports and submitted reports by the Secret Service witnesses that were there. That were at the autopsy, that were in the plaza, that took place in the pre-planning of the trip, that did the advance work, that were on Air Force One, bringing the body home. He's reading reports. But he's the figurehead. So they went for high credibility. Same way why LBJ really pressured Earl Warren into heading up the Warren Commission. Earl Warren did not want any part of the bill. No, not me. And basically, Johnson put his well-known rhetorical thumb right down on Warren, and he said, oh, you're going to do this. Don't worry about it, you're going to do this. And he did. Time constraints is another thing. The Warren report, the investigation was not concluded. According to the FBI, Hoover says, hey, we had all the information we needed within basically 5 days. The rest was just, Brady grunt work, out in the field. But we knew what it was going to show. So basically, the investigation was shut down. Getting the information together, they had asked for extensions on the report, couldn't get it. And when they knew it was going to be a firm deadline, some of these chapters had not even been written, and they had like 5 weeks left. And that's what we call the Warren report. I'm not saying the government's complicit. I'm not saying any element of the government was complicit in the assassination. I'm putting it into the perspective of the time, the perspective of the people that were directly involved in the decision of what the Warren report needed to show at that particular point in time. The biggest mistake we make as historians are people looking into an event is to take our perception and our knowledge from 2001 and overlay it on 1963 or 1950 or 1970. You can't do it because procedures are different, ideology is different, social customs and mores are different. People are new in how they interacted with one. You have to immerse yourself in, you're talking about the Kennedy assassination, what was taking place in that specter of time. And we'll get more into this when I talk about the Secret Service, the difference in procedures today as they were in 1963. Big versus different. And people make a mistake of saying, well, why didn't they? And of course they were negligent because they didn't. Oh, that's standard practice then. And we're talking about government agencies and getting leads and confirming what their procedures and practices were. Tom Ridge can't do it today. And with Homeland Security, he's getting no cooperation from the FBI or the CIA. They're doing the same thing they've always been doing. No, we don't have to. Don't have to. But you have to look at what was normal. Don't take your 2001 perception. Go back in that old time machine. Okay, this is what was operating. Any other questions? Shut up, James. So do you want to follow the Warren? You want to follow the Warren report question down a little further?
No, that's fine.
Okay. I think I bored you people enough for an hour. How would you like a little break?
Does hypnosis,
Regressive hypnosis?
yeah, does that help at all with,
Oh, absolutely.
okay.
The-
Trying to recall details?
The problem is that those types of recovered memories under hypnosis are not admissible in court. And that's a very good question because one of the things for us witness credibility and reliability that I forgot to mention go first to their earliest statement, then go to their sworn statement. I can stand up here and tell you I'm a Queen of Sheba and maybe convince some of you that I am. If I was on the witness stand, if I was signing a sworn document, I would not put in the honor suspicion. You can garnish a lot of information that's not sworn testimony. Things that maybe would not be admissible in court, but will give you insight. As far as taking you right to the bottom line with that information, You can't do it unless you have supporting data from someplace else. You know, unless everything jives. Their sworn statements jive with their earliest statements and with their recovered memory. Because hypnosis does work. And we do remember very fine details, you know, under hypnosis that our conscious mind will not allow. Or it's cluttered with other stuff that we don't even know we remember. I know several of the medical witnesses. There was a friend of mine in New York. No, I don't think you know this. That several years ago organized some of the medical witnesses from Dallas and from Bethesda, from Parkland Hospital and Bethesda Naval Hospital outside of Washington, Bethesda. And they came knowing they were going to be hypnotized. And it's all on videotape. Not available, but it's all on video. And it's most interesting because it does clarify, again, a lot of the beliefs in the child. It gives you more specific, illuminating information on things that they had mentioned before. And it also proves the negative of some of the things they mentioned. And it's an exaggeration. It's a misperception.
I'm not clear because
Oh, me either.
now, I have my own beliefs regarding all this. But my beliefs come back from when I was 19 years old when the president was shot. I was part of the society, the war aid, what forensic science was like then.
Right.
Because
So you
I'm very
remember.
much interested in forensic science and I know what it's like today. And yes, you can't compare the two. But I've seen both sides, okay? And I don't think so. I think if you look at it from a perspective of being there, you know what? And they have nothing to do with today's society. I'm talking about that society then. And you know what? It's real hard not to look at it as a conspiracy. Without all reading all these books and with all these other kinds of things going on. And I'll tell you what really cemented it in my head. My husband and I were down in D.C. Dallas. And we walked here in Gaza. And we
Were you
walked,
surprised at how small it was?
we walked here in Plaza, we walked into the parade, and no one can tell me that them changing that parade route to that little jutty road, there had to be a reason for that. And in my opinion, that's the one point that has to be looked into, because I think that if you were ever there and you see, it was a line across the main, it was just a little side road, it had no purpose. You didn't get more crowds over there. You did not. There weren't any more crowds. There was no reason to turn there at all. Plus the other things, the films and so on that you see with your own eyes, and I know what I saw with Kenny's head going front and going backwards. You know, I can't prove it, but I think that my judgment on it is based on that time, not now. I'm not looking back.
Right, it just,
Does that make sense?
something to throw into the pot that you may want to consider. The motorcade route was never used.
Then plan that way.
There were, yeah, when this gets into the personal part. Why don't we talk about that after our break, okay? Because that goes into Secret Service authorizing that parade route. But what happened, you know, in the interim, you know, to that point, that was the decided parade route. Okay, who made those decisions? Who were part and parcel of it? Okay. There are always, when it's been decided that the president is going to a particular location, you know, be it abroad, be it domestically here within the United States. The politicos, you know, have their reasons why the president is going there. Okay? Now it becomes a matter of security for the president. In the planning stages, it's like, well, okay, here's the timetable, this is what he's all going to do. How do we get him from point A to point B? Okay, within the time that's allotted. Okay, what's the driving distance this way? What's the driving distance if we go that way? What are the security risks? And when people talk about going straight and then hitting Industrial Boulevard, we're taking them through warehouses. A warehouse district is not real secure, you know, very slummy area. But in order, Kennedy was always running behind. He was notoriously late for everything. So he had to get to that luncheon the fastest way was to take him down out to Cemetery Way and out, and then he was right there.
They could have done a curve on Main Street. The curb's on the only problem.
That wasn't on the way.
The car might block it out.
That limo, like all presidential limos, you know, are extremely heavy. They're loaded down, you know, and they're close to the ground. And the last thing you want is the president to knock on your knee. Okay, let's take a break. 5 minutes. The United States Secret Service. What do you think the Secret Service does? What is the Secret Service?
Department of the Treasury.
Pardon me?
It's part of the Treasury Department.
Part of the Treasury Department. What does it do? Presidential protection. Yes, Jamie?
Run down counterfeiters.
Run down counterfeit. The United States Secret Service was established in 1865. Interestingly enough, Abraham Lincoln signed the papers establishing the United States Secret Service late in the afternoon of the day he was tested. You go, oh, geez, maybe that should have been a clue, but it wasn't. The Civil War had just been over for a few days. His military protection had been pulled away because of the animosity still between the North and the South. You have a, what? Not a lone nut. You have a conspiracy to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. Okay? 8 people caught, tried, hung. The Secret Service was established for one purpose, fighting counterfeiting. And it still is a very, very major part of their job today. You may not think counterfeiting is very big, but let me tell you, in the early 1990s, all across Europe, they wouldn't accept U.S. $20 bills because there was something called the super dollar, which was an incredibly well done counterfeit $20 bill. And there was so much of it, and they traced it back pretty much, it came from a Colombian cartel, because they used a lot of counterfeit money in their drug dealing. I mean, they've got more money than God. Why do they have to counterfeit money in their drug dealing? But they did. It is projected, different historians will give you the percentage of between 33% and 65% of all currency in circulation in the United States in 1865 was counterfeit. Those of you that remember your Lincoln history, you got lots of flack for what's called establishing the greenback, because that was our federal currency. And the states' right had said, no, 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 no. It's our money. We print our own money. States had their own money. Individual banks within a state had their own money. Now, if I take a Connecticut State Bank note, let's say a $5 note, and spend it in Chicago, Illinois, who's going to know if it's counterfeit? It was real easy to have a lot of counterfeit money in circulation because of the state printing of their own currency. I could go on and on about counterfeit. Counterfeiting is just really fascinating. There's a whole sociological study of counterfeiters and why the main places were there. That was their only function. Officially, according to the government, presidential protection did not start until the assassination of McKinley. But it really started with Grover Cleveland because he had so many death threats and their daughter was receiving extremely serious kidnapping threats. And so Mrs. Cleveland, known to be very strong and marching down the halls and just doing her thing, bugged everybody to death, specifically because the kidnapping threat against her daughter had 4 operatives, as they were called then, instead of agents, from the Secret Service, assigned to protect the president and the family. Totally out of their purview. They're not legal to do this. But the Secret Service was the only federal law enforcement investigative body. When World War I jumped off, they needed people because all the espionage going on, you know, within our continental borders, they handle that. Who are they going to go to? Yeah, you have local law enforcement that can keep an eye on it, but they also needed somebody on the federal level. 8 Secret Service agents were assigned to a New York office to do intelligence. They're the ones who cracked, I don't know if you remember your history, there was a briefcase that was found that cracked the German code. That's what we need. And those documents were the briefcase found by the Secret Service. So what happened to these 8 guys? They're going, aha, a lot of success. We need another agency. Here was the 8 Secret Service agents that became the foundation for what we know now as the FBI. And we think of the FBI now as the big federal investigative body. But it didn't start out that way. Today, the Secret Service has thousands and thousands and thousands of agents, thousands and thousands and thousands of what's called uniformed officers, the uniformed division. They are the White House police. They protect the embassies in Washington. They are assigned to the U.S. embassies on foreign soil. Part of the uniformed division is the technical division. Our counter-assault rifle people. And if you look at things in the White House, look up on the roof. What is it? Those guys with rifles, they're part of the uniformed division of the Secret Service. Technology. Your computer tech, part of the Secret Service. They have their own forensic science division. And it goes on and on and on. Okay? They not only do counterfeiting, they do identity theft. They are charged now under congressional act to do identity theft. And God forbid any of you should run into that problem because it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger every day. Your Social Security number is being sold over the internet. Your credit card number is being sold over the internet. They're charged with cellular phone crimes. Comes under their purview. How many of you use cell phones? Do you know you can drive down the street and with an inexpensive little machine, I can stick it out that window and I will capture your number. And all I have to do is reprogram a chip in somebody else's cell phone and advise them, hey, don't go past the month with this number because it'll catch up with you. Call Iran if you want. It's done every day. Every day. Hundreds of thousands of cell phone numbers are cloned. Big business. Big business. Not only with criminals in the United States, but also with foreign elements operating within the United States. Okay. Secret Service has a ton of responsibilities. But what was their responsibility? What was the Secret Service like in 1963? Anybody have any idea? Secret Service had between 420 and 450 agents for the entire country, the entire world. They also had offices in Paris and 2 other locations abroad. 420 to 450 guys. That was it. I mean, can anybody conceptualize how little 450, let's take a minute to remember 450 is for the entire world? That has to do with counterfeiting and presidential protection. So how did they do their job and how did they do it effectively? The Secret Service, and even today, has to rely a lot on local law enforcement in order to ensure the security of the President of the United States or any of their protectees. Okay, it was the President and the Vice President at that particular time. It's now been expanded to be President's wife, presidential children, cabinet members, certain embassies, foreign dignitaries, everyone that comes to the United States, Perez from Israel, all the people that have been here recently are all given Secret Service protection. Okay. In order to generate the information that's necessary, in order to effectively protect the protectee, you've got to rely on local law enforcement. They're the ones with their fingers on the pulse of what's happening in their community. You know, who's an agitator, who's a right-winger, who gets the demonstrations going, involving a particular philosophy or an anti-government thing. Who are the people that attend this? They've got to keep this local, that keep their finger on it. So it's the Pittsburgh cops, or in 1963, the Dallas Police, the Dallas Sheriff's Department, the local FBI office. Okay, because they're looking at a different set of crimes and interfacing with the local law enforcement. I'm talking about sheriff's departments and police departments. Okay. In 1963, the Secret Service had, as they do now, it's called a hot list. At that particular time, it was a list of 100 names. People that were active threats to the President of the United States, located all around the world. These were the people that they tracked. Okay, mercenaries, hired assassins, big deal people. Okay. That was kept in Washington. There's a thing called a trickle that the Secret Service takes with them, and it has a picture of everyone on their hot list with a little bio. When the President is coming to town, today, even in 1963, it is up to local law enforcement, the local FBI, the local CIA office, to funnel the names and information about those people to the Secret Service to help them identify who is a potential threat to the President of the United States. When Kennedy was in Miami, speaking at the Americana Hotel, this was all part of, he went to Florida before he went to Texas. They identified 2 busboys in the hospital that had anti-Castro Cuban inclinations, and they were told not to report to work that day. Okay, that information came from the locals, not from Washington, because Washington has to deal with the broad overview. Okay? When they talk about there were no active threats reported to Washington from Dallas for this trip. That's something you read in lots of books, hear people talk about. Well, that's a lie. Now you think Dallas, at that time was a real hotbed. Very far right-wing conservative. I mean, lots going on. A lot of people didn't like Kennedy. So you think there would be more. Those are the two that we know were reported to Washington. Other people were checked out by the local FBI office, checked out by the local sheriff's department, the local Dallas Police Department, as far as whether they really were an active threat to the president. Typical statements you'll hear regarding the Secret Service and the Warren Commission is that it was a lone nut. Lone nut. One person acting singular. That's the type of person they usually looked for. Because that was the profile, generally and typically, of the type of person that posed an active threat to the President of the United States. Somebody who is a little, elevator didn't go to the top, little off kilter. And this had been going on ever since the Secret Service started protecting the President. I can't tell you how many reports from like Teddy Roosevelt, Secret Service detail, Wilson Secret Service detail. This was at a time when, if you wanted to talk to the President of the United States, you went to the White House and you sat in a chair, a long row of chairs, and you just went in, and you talked to the President, and then you left. I have one report with Wilson. This is during the war, and this guy's sitting there and sitting there and sitting there all day. And finally, the President had other things that he had to do, and he was told he could not see the President that day. And the guy said, "You don't understand." He's talking to the Secret Service. He said, "You don't understand. It is urgent. It is absolutely urgent that I see President Wilson right now, today." And he said, "Well, what's this about today?" "Here in my briefcase. It's urgent. I've got to see Wilson." When he opened his briefcase, he took out a toilet seat that said, "This has been blessed by the Virgin Mary. I have to give it to Wilson." Okay? I have tons and tons of reports like that. First of all, it's a funny incident. But it's very typical of a lot of the threats. Remember I talked earlier about you got to put it in context of the historical period, what was going on at the time. There were not a lot of people out there thinking about killing the president. And there have been. But there are people out there, isolating who they are, keeping a watch on them. Here's the utmost importance. The majority of them are loose. Just loose. That's why you read in the Warren report, they're making a point of Lee Harvey Oswald was what? Not the sharpest pencil in the box. A loner, a little off, a little crazy. Because that fit the typical profile. What did not fit the typical profile is the finding of no conspiracy. Abraham Lincoln, assassinated by conspiracy. McKinley, assassinated by conspiracy. One shooter, but definitely involved with political networks. The FDR assassination attempt when he was president-elect in Miami. Single handgun, went up to the car, tried to shoot him, hit the mayor of Chicago and killed him instead. Bad shot. McKinley, he's at the exposition in Buffalo, going down the reception line, people coming up to shake his hand, shot, right, point blank. Unfortunately about that, Sam Callahan, there's a Secret Service agent of the office, the Buffalo office, was standing right to his right when it happened. Sam Callahan was a boyhood and lifelong friend of McKinley. Very sad, very traumatic. So, with that type of personal involvement and strings he could pull, and because of having a president assassinated, that's why presidential protection came on board. We had a direct need for it, And let's face it, this is our third president that's been assassinated. Okay? Go up to the Truman assassination attempt. Anybody know that Truman was almost assassinated in 1950? Capitol House, big gun battle, occurred with two shooters, political motivation, political party, conspiracy. How come John Kennedy alone not? Hinckley is crazy with the Reagan assassination attempt. I mean, no doubt about that. I mean, that man's just out to lunch. Very crazy. But you count, okay, how many were conspiracies, active conspiracies, as opposed to how many were lone nuts? Where's the weight? But, okay, it's a very difficult thing, even in 1963, to kill the President of the United States without having a great deal of planning, and a lot of resources. Absolutely, something went wrong with the Secret Service in Dallas. What went wrong? They lost their means. The one thing, all their training, all their pride, they're taught to protect. And they lost them. You know how hurtful that was? Because with only 420, 450 agents, the majority of those agents had met Kennedy. He traveled around a lot, and a lot of them had done protective detail with him. It's very hurtful. It's a big black mark on the surface itself. And these are men that take a lot of pride in what they do. Okay, just like the firefighters and the New York policemen, today, law enforcement people are very proud of what they do. They take it very seriously. There's a philosophical flaw in the service in 1963 that allowed the assassination to happen. Traditionally, remember we talked about other presidential assassins? Well, you can go through political assassinations. They're mostly one-on-one, close-up. Okay, very, very, very few exceptions in decades of assassination attempts and accomplished assassinations. Single shooter, up close, personal. Because political feelings, political underpinnings of all this are very personal. Consequently, shooter's going to come from the front. Okay? I'm a single person. I'm a lone nut. How do I get Jamie? The easiest. And I want to kill him. I don't want to wound him. I don't want to take any chances. Up close, personal from the front. That's the general philosophy. There was a huge article that I read from 1934 by Chief Wolfe, who was a long-term head of the Secret Service. And he went into detail about that philosophy. And it was like a light bulb going off in my head. And I started tracing it back and then tracing it forward to see if this philosophy, this standard, this thought pattern was still in place in 1963 with the Secret Service, and absolutely it was. So they're protecting the president, but they're expecting, if there's an assassination attempt, it's going to be close range, and it's going to be from the front. If you look at the films in Dealey Plaza, you'll see the agents on the board. When they're on the board, they're running boards on each side of the limo. Okay, plus there's handholds in the back so they can hop on the back of the car. You'll see them looking in different directions. But picture after picture, the same agent is looking in the same direction. Why? Because it was standard procedure and policy. It makes a lot of sense to me that each agent was assigned a specific position on the board and a specific area that they were to cover. That's why some of the agents didn't see something happening, because that's not what their job, their duty at that particular time was to do. They were to be covering this site, not, you know, the grassy knoll or the school book depository. Okay? Very defined procedure. You'll hear some people postulate that the Secret Service was complicit in the assassination of John Kennedy. Seymour Hersh, in his recent book within the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, called The Dark Side of Camelot, has interviews with some of Kennedy's White House detail agents, and they talk about his immorality. And some researchers have jumped on and said, aha, because he was hanging out with hookers and playing around on his wife, some of these agents decided he needed to be assassinated. Well, come on, are you going to kill the President of the United States because he's an adulterer? I don't think so. It's too risky. And it's baseless. The general thing that I have found about the Secret Service, ever since they started doing presidential protection, up until present, to a man, to an agent that I've talked to, and to their family, if the agent is deceased, is that they may not have liked this or that about the president, but basically, they don't vote in elections, because they do not want to be protecting somebody they didn't vote for, so they don't vote for the president. And they will tell you, it's not my job to judge him as a person, to judge his politics. It's my job to protect him. And I try not to pay attention to anything that isn't part of my job, that I need to know to protect him. Okay, so Seymour Hersh trying to make an issue out of that, very fallacious. Very fallacious. We were going to talk about the route and how that happened. You have an advanced state. Let's take Dallas for instance. They knew when Kennedy was coming to Dallas. So the local law enforcement did their homework, did their interviewing, got their information all together, forwarded what they needed to Washington, to the Democratic National Convention, because let's face it, this was nothing more than a political trip. Okay? Big difference between the Secret Service and the President has always been. The President is political, wants maximum exposure. The Secret Service has its way, the President would never go out of the White House. Okay, they're running contradictory to one another constantly. The Secret Service is enacted. They must protect the President of the United States. The President doesn't have to listen to them. What are you going to do? They told Harry Truman all the time, don't go out every morning for a walk. He said, if they're going to get me, they're going to get me. That's part of my routine. I've always walked in the morning. I'm going walking every morning. And they said, at least vary your route. And that's the most they could get Harry Truman to do, is change where he would walk every morning. So it wasn't a set pattern for somebody to walk into, but they couldn't stop him from walking. People have said John Kennedy never told the Secret Service how to do their job. Well, no, he didn't. He had assistants to do that, to say, no, we're not doing that, we're doing this. Okay? You'll hear about the bubble top. Gee, isn't it very suspicious the Secret Service ordered the bubble top off the limousine if it had been on, it would have deflected the bullet. One of Kennedy's closest friends and aides was with him in Fort Worth at the morning of the assassination. He's the one where they were discussing, gee, what's the weather going to be in Dallas? Okay, no bubble top. He's the one who personally made the call to the agent in Dallas that said no bubble top. Maximum visibility. The winds were down, the rains were gone, it was going to be sunny in Dallas. That's why the bubble top wasn't on. People will say, oh, well look, a couple weeks before this, he was in Pennsylvania, and it was a beautiful day, and the bubble top was on. It doesn't hold water, because at that particular time, if the researchers that found that as evidence of complicity would do their homework, I spent a lot of time doing Kennedy's personal medical history. At that particular time, he was getting over an extremely, very, very serious cases of flu. They weren't even sure. He never really should have been on that trip. He was very sick. He was running a temperature of 104. And he's not going to be in an open car. They're going to have the bubble top on. The man is ill. You don't find it in the press. These researchers who claim this is part of proving complicity by the Secret Service in the assassination of John Kennedy, all I have to do is say, do your homework. This is why that bubble top was on a sunny day a couple weeks before the assassination. Okay. Back to the date set for presidential visit. Locals do their homework, funnel the information. The Secret Service sends an advance team to that location. One agent is sent a week, that's 1963 standard, was sent a week beforehand to help coordinate what had already been planned by the locals. Okay, and put final seals on. Then two agents, would arrive a couple days before the presidential visit. They all rode the motorcade route. They timed it out. The motorcade route was set beforehand. As soon as the location at the trademark for the luncheon was set, see, because there were two very valid alternatives to where this luncheon was going to be. And it was a political decision out of Washington, in coordination with the Dallas Democratic Committee, that the site of the luncheon should be the trademark. So they had one route that would take them to the women's building that had already been planned out. See, that's where you get a change in route. That was the route. If it was going to be here, if the route was going to be the trademark, you had to go this way. Because I mentioned before, times and strength, Kennedy was always running light. You've got to have it down pat, minutes. Okay. And when you look at all the survey reports, each Secret Service agent, an advance agent, and any of the agents that are in the preliminary planning stages for a trip, before the trip takes place, do what are called advanced survey reports. Some of them are extremely extensive, but they're very detailed. Who's doing what, when, why it's being done. And you go through all these survey reports, and then there's a follow-up report talking about after the trip. Okay, and where a variation may have taken place. Like an agent was supposed to be on duty on the right side of the podium, but he really was on the left side for the event. Okay? So you have all this documentation. A lot of it that had never been released until the 1990s. Would have made things a lot clearer to me as an assassination researcher if I had had access to those documents previously. But they're very fascinating to me. People have maintained in sworn testimony, in reports, in interviews, that the route wasn't changed. Or, gee, I remember something about a route being changed, but I don't remember what it was. because they don't remember there were alternative sites for this lunchroom. Okay? But once the decision was made, there was going to be the trademark. That's when that motorcade route was written. What else could you like to talk about? I can tell you, Bill Greer, the driver of limousine, did not shoot Kennedy. You will read that in some of the literature. They even used the Zapruder film, which is about the zillionth generation of it, where it does look like he turns and you can see the sun going off the gun.
What was standard layout for how the cars were set up? Because today, you'll have the minor dignitaries in the front and the president in the back, but in Dallas, it was reversed.
It alternated. It really did, depending upon the venue. The number of cars in the motorcade, because there were motorcades, smaller towns, fewer dignitaries, less important. This president was there. So the presidential car could be the third car back. You can have a lead car with some type of dignitary or just to clear the way. You can have your local constabulary or, local law enforcement bigwig, and then the presidential limo. Big venues like Dallas, they would try to put it in the front, but put more people in front, so they have more people to accommodate. But the people were there to see the president. They weren't there to see the press pool. They weren't there, So you had a lot of cars going behind them. But they wanted to have the limo position to get maximum coverage for the venue, for the number of people that were expected, and the number of dignitaries they had to accommodate. So there wasn't a set rule. He was never the lead car. Never. And behind him would be the Secret Service follow-up car. And the regulation at that time, and generally and typically, when the limousine was moving slowly, there was to be, on average, 5 feet between that limo and the Secret Service follow-up car, because in case of emergency, they could get there really quickly. Now, how many of you have seen the film of Clint Hill running to the limousine to get on the back of it? We'll see some nods of head. Okay. Clint Hill was assigned to Jackie Kennedy. He was her Secret Service agent. He's the one who reacted, but he was on the very front of the left running board. He took off. And if you notice from the film, he almost fell off that car. He reached and grabbed, he went to mount the car, and his foot slipped, and he had to run again to catch it. The reason why is because that limousine was starting to take off. I mean, the limousines, even then, they could accelerate very quickly, even for as heavy as they were, and they went. And that's why Clint Hill missed his first step, because the limousine, he was lucky to catch it. You'll also hear it postulated that one of the agents, Paul Landis, was called back by Reddy, who